This week, I'll be checking out one of the most highly anticipated releases of the year, the Final Crisis 10th Anniversary Omnibus. What's happening, everybody? This is Alex and I'm back again with another Omnibus review. For this video, I'll be trying to break down the complexity that is Final Crisis, but also comparing this newly released Omnibus to the previous collected editions. As I've already established in my previous videos, I am honestly a huge fan of Grant Morrison's work, and Final Crisis is absolutely no exception. Before diving into the first pages of the Final Crisis Omnibus, I will be upfront and say that there's without a doubt essential background reading required here if you want to get as much out of this major DCU event. As per usual, I will not spoil the entire story, but feel free to engage with me in the comments below if you want any further clarification of any of the following titles. In DC Universe Issue 0, The Prelude to Final Crisis, there are references to a war in heaven. This reference is to the 8-issue miniseries Death of the New Gods, which is collected as a standard hardcover, which is where I think you all should start off reading. The series pulls no punches, and we have the new gods getting picked off one by one, where an unknown serial killer makes each of the gods' hearts explode. The strongest aspect of this book is that the author Jim Starlin manages to give all the new gods their moment, which also gives the reader background on who the new gods are and what the anti-life equation is all about. Tying at the end of the Death of the New Gods is Countdown to Final Crisis Issue 50. I'm sorry to have even brought up this series. As much as I love Paul Dini, I just can't get over the fact that the final battle of the last standing New Gods, Darkseid and Orion, starts off with Jimmy Olsen slapping Darkseid around. Feel free to correct me in the comments below, but I saw this issue as a pivotal moment where Darkseid dies at the hands of Orion, as we never saw him die at the end of the Death of the New Gods miniseries. His death basically releases his soul, which tumbles through time itself to where we see him as Boss Darkseid in the Seven Soldiers miniseries. I may cover this if they ever release an omnibus, but for the Final Crisis preparation, I recommend purchasing issue 50 if you can find it in the dollar bin at your local comic book store, or you can always pick it up digitally through Comixology. At this point is where we actually start to lead into Final Crisis. The Mr. Miracle miniseries revolves around Shiloh Norman realizing that all the new gods have been reincarnated, and Darkseid is now Boss Darkseid, who has been gaining power all these years in the Darkseid Club. We learn that the club houses all the evil new gods from Apocalypse and is a recruiting house for all the new loyal servants. In addition to the floppies and trades, the entire miniseries is found in the Seven Soldiers Omnibus, which are covered in a very recent video. I have included a link to the video in the description below, as well as a link to Amazon and where you can buy it. As for the Darkseid Club tie-ins, this cropped up in several issues of Birds of Prey, The Flash, and Teen Titans. The events of Teen Titans leads into the 6-issue miniseries Terror Titans. The next time we will see the club is in Final Crisis, where we see Boss Darkseid teaching the captured meta-human children to say the anti-life equation. In my opinion, these tie-ins are not essential, but it is a fun read. I recommend picking these up digitally, as to my knowledge, these aren't collected in any trades with the exception of Terror Titans, but that's also out of print. As for tie-ins and preludes go, JLA issue 21 is essential as it gets for setting up the event. We get introduced to Libra, who is one of the main villains for Final Crisis. In this issue, he recruits the Human Flame and begins forming a new secret society of supervillains, leading into a gruesome scene in the first issue of Final Crisis and a Requiem one-shot. His origin isn't fleshed out until the Final Crisis Secret Files one-shot, which I totally recommend. Lastly, for the Batman Final Crisis tie-ins, I totally recommend reading Batman RIP that starts off from issue 676 and goes on to 681. This will lead into understanding the events in Batman RIP The Missing Chapters, which is basically Final Crisis from Bruce's perspective. I highly recommend picking up the Batman by Grant Morrison Omnibus, which features Batman RIP. See the link in the description below for my recent review and where to purchase it from Amazon. Now that we have the background reading out the way, let's get into the various editions what has been released under the Final Crisis banner. For the floppies, this includes the main series issues 1 to 7, where issue 1 had a director's cut special, the one-shots Requiem, Resist, Submit and Secret Files, the tie-in miniseries Legion of Three Worlds, Revelations, Rogue's Revenge, and Superman Beyond 3D, which comes with a pair of 3D glasses, and Batman tie-in issues 682 and 683. I'd like to mention that Rage of the Red Lanterns was marketed as a tie-in one-shot for Final Crisis, but was later on rebranded as a prelude to Blackest Night. This correction made sense to me. There was also a 4-6 issue miniseries under the Final Crisis Aftermath banner, which was collected as trade paperbacks, but even though they were not essential to the Final Crisis storyline, they were extremely highly enjoyable reads, especially run. There was a particular page where the Condiment Kick met his demise, which was very brutal, yet made me laugh out loud. The other Aftermath titles were Escape, Ink, and Dance.
You can dance. You can dance. Everybody look at your pants.
Again, this is not essential to the story, but think of it like Age of Heroes spinning out of Dark Metal, where you get great material that spins out of a major event. In addition to the Final Crisis Aftermath event, we do have Superman Batman issue 76, which should have been under this banner as well. This issue will be collected in Superman Batman Volume 7 in late February next year, but in the meantime, if you want to pick this up, your best bet is digitally. Moving on to the collected editions. We first have the standard hardcover, which contains the 7-issue series along with Superman Beyond 3D edition and Submit. These are ordered correctly, which lies between Final Crisis issues 3 and 4, and we also get some pages from the sketchbook as an extra. Each of the 3 tie-in miniseries, Legion of Three Worlds, Revelations, and Rogue's Revenge, also first came in a standard hardcover format, but later on was released as a trade paperback. For the main Final Crisis trade paperback new edition, what gets added compared to the standard hardcover is Batman 682 and 683. This tie-in sits in between issues 5 and 6, but what is missing from this trade paperback are extracts from the sketchbook. The companion collects the director's cut for Final Crisis issue 1, the one-shot Secret Files, Requiem and Resist, along with the Secret Files sketchbook. These one-shots is a must, and it was a crime for not ever to be collected in the main trades. Continuing on to the Absolute Edition, we get to see J.G. Jones and Doug Mahnke's art in all its glory. Like the new edition of the trade paperback, the Absolute Edition collects the main 7 series, the one-shot Submit, Batman 682 and 683, and Superman Beyond 3D. I'd like to point out that this is the 3D version with the supplied pair of glasses. This is all ordered correctly as Grant Morrison attended. We also get to see the script from issue 1, which is basically the director's cut, a variant cover gallery, and an explanation of the anti-life equation by the man himself, Grant Morrison. This explanation also recaps the events leading up to Final Crisis. The main highlight of the extras is that it contains the full sketchbook and not just an extract as seen in the previous editions. It is just pure joy to go through these pages. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see an absolute Final Crisis companion where we would have most likely gotten all the preludes, one-shots and tie-in miniseries. Now onto the Omnibus, as I know this is the main reason you came here to see. Easily clocking over 1,500 pages, this is most likely the biggest Omnibus DC has ever released. We have the Darkseid by J.G. Jones artwork from issue 4 being used on the front and spine. I totally dig the consistency and color palette being used here. It simply works, and truly love this design by Megan Bellison. Taking off the dust jacket, we are greeted with a map like cardboard again. As you know from my previous reviews, every time I see this I shake my head with disappointment, as I know the DC design team always knocks it out the park when they are given the opportunity to design the additional covers. I am not sure if this is due to the production costs and budget for the book, but when I take the dust jacket off and see additional artwork, it always brings a huge smile to my face. In any case, I know I'm too greedy as we finally get, after all these years, a definitive collected edition that contains everything under the sun that is critically relevant to this DCU major event. Rather than me mindlessly reading through what it collects, let me take a step further and provide you how this omnibus is actually ordered throughout the book. I can see that the DC team has put a lot of thought in the ordering. I'm not sure if this is a design decision to not include the table of contents, but I actually like it because it forces the reader to binge read this cover to cover. I know a lot of you, including myself, is guilty to skip over certain chapters because we look at a title and then predetermine whether it is or isn't an integral part of the story. This line of thinking can lead to missing out highly enjoyable and critical moments that can add depth to the main arc. And this is Morrison that we are talking about. Diving into his stunning work is basically like learning a new language. I would never recommend the reader just to read Final Crisis 1 to 7. In my opinion, they would truly get lost, or certain key events wouldn't be so climactic. So having this book kick off with the introductory credits and words by Jay Babcock, then immediately getting right into the meat of it is absolutely fine with me, especially when it comes to Final Crisis. For the ordering, we start off with DC Universe 0 and make our way through all the prelude tie-in issues we talked about before in Flash, Teen Titans and Birds of Prey. What's interesting that on the DC Comics website, they didn't mention to include issue 21 of JLA, which was a critical prelude to set up Libra. Thankfully, they included it here in this omnibus. Then we move on to the Batman RIP issues. I know I just said that you shouldn't skip parts, but if you recently picked up and read the Batman by Grant Morrison Omnibus, then Batman RIP would be fresh in your mind. That said, there is an exception here, as this omnibus includes issue 701, which is a must read. I assume that issue 701 will also make its way in the second volume of the Batman by Grant Morrison Omnibus. This then leads into the first issue of Final Crisis and expands on a shocking death in the Requiem one-shot. We then take a short break here from the main story to pick up where Teen Titans finished off in the 6th-issue Terror Titans miniseries. Then we dive back into Final Crisis issue 2, then the Rogue's Revenge miniseries, and then back into Final Crisis issue 3. To my surprise, DC Universe The Last Will and Testament issue 1 is also included here, and it was never previously collected in any edition. I'm so glad they did, because I always enjoy Brad Meltzer's work. Then comes the Superman stretch of stories where he's taken away from the events that's happening on Earth in Superman Beyond 2D edition, as well as Legion of Three Worlds. Before diving back into the core story, what's next is the Secret Files one-shot that features the origin of Libra, as well as a 5-issue Revelations miniseries, then leading back into the Resist and Submit one-shots. The rest of the issues plays out like the recent collected editions, with Final Crisis issues 4 to 7, with the Batman Last Rites tie-ins between issues 5 and 6. A key highlight here to note that since we don't get any extras, we get instead the key aftermath issues Superman Batman 76 and Batman 702. I would take this over any extras like the sketchbook, as we already got it in the Absolute Edition and parts in the companion. Being the book this humongous, I think it would be absolutely crazy to add on another 50 plus pages of extras, but we do get 2 one-shot outros with Grant Morrison's anti-life equation explanation and the words of Lilith by Rucker. Moving on to the binding and reading experience. You have just seen me traverse through the book back and forth, so you should have no difficulty reading this huge Omni, despite this having a flat spine, but make sure that you have a great surface to read it on. Maybe it is just my copy with this flat spine, but on the positive side, I am definitely not getting any bear trap effect or major gutter loss. In fact, reading the first chunk doesn't fold the book shut, which is a major plus. Personally, I believe this is an amazing collection and so thankful that DC has put this together. I know that the $150 recommended retail can be very pricey, but if you don't have a local comic book store where you can get a good discount, you can always pick one up from Amazon for around 40% off. I also have provided a link in the description below if you want to pick up this amazing release. So what do you all think? Given all the past hardcovers, trade paperbacks and even the Absolute Edition, will you be picking this omnibus up since it basically collects everything but the Aftermath tie-ins? Sound off in the comments below on your thoughts. A special thanks to you all for your continued support for making this channel grow. I really appreciate the feedback I get from all the videos I post, except for the collection video requests. You know how I feel about those. All kidding aside, I really love interacting with you all, not just on YouTube but also on Instagram and Twitter, so feel free to reach out with any recommended books I should cover in the domain of DC and Vertigo. This is Alex and I'll catch you in the next video.